All right, we're back on the record. We're getting juror number 44. Or 44. All right, welcome back. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Slisher for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Juror 44, now it's good afternoon, and I know it's been a long day. I needed to just follow up on a couple of questions, but first I was curious if you could just maybe share with us a little bit. You've been in leadership capacities in various nonprofits in your career. Can you please share a little bit about what drew you to that sort of work?
Well, initially I went to college to become a dietitian, and then there was I think a family social studies course or something that we had to take in college that required an internship. And I interned at a place, and I just was drawn to it. I knew, like, this is what I wanted to do.
So what type of work, what was it about the work that made you like it and want to stay in it?
I think it was, feeling like I was doing something to make our communities better, stronger, help people live more independent, healthy lives, that kind of thing. Just my work was it was about helping others, And
it seems in jobs like that you start kind of more boots on the ground, but then you've gone into management. Do you still find the same satisfaction as a manager, administrator as you did when you first started?
Yes, but I also love fundraising.
You love fundraising?
Yeah.
Okay. What makes you good at that?
What makes me what?
What makes you good at fundraising?
I'm not afraid to ask for money.
So you would probably describe yourself as being fairly direct.
Yes.
And a good communicator.
Yes.
I do want to follow up on a couple of answers to your questionnaire responses, one of which you stated that you somewhat disagreed with the proposition of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department. Could you please share with us a little bit about your reasoning behind that response?
I think my reasoning behind that is, as I alluded to earlier, I don't think I'd feel safe in my community without the police there. But I do know that there needs to, as I said before too, there needs to be some systematic change. And so I don't know all the details. I don't read what is reported in detail about that idea or what is happening with City Council or anything right now. So I don't know what I don't know, but I just know that I wouldn't feel 100% safe in my community without them, but I also know there needs to be change.
If you needed help, you would call the police and feel comfortable?
Yes.
With them coming into your home and the expectation that they would help you?
Yes.
You also somewhat agreed with the proposition that because law enforcement officers have such difficult jobs, it's wrong to second guess their decisions. You somewhat agreed with that statement. Can you please explain that a little further?
In their role, you want to trust that their intentions are good and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing by the law and through, proper procedure or training or whatever. But we are human and we err and we can't always be perfect, and we do all have an implicit bias. And so I think that's where I'm a little, somewhat, I guess.
And so you think about the specific question, second guessing a decision that a law enforcement officer makes while they're on duty. If you were asked to serve as a juror in this case, you understand that's precisely what you would be asked to do, would be to evaluate the conduct of an officer while they were on duty and determine whether or not that conduct was a crime. How would you feel about participating in a process that you somewhat disagree with?
Well, I guess maybe I didn't take the question the same way as how it was posed.
How did you take it?
Well, because at the end of the day, like even in my leadership roles, that's what we have to do. We have to evaluate incidences with our staff or with our constituents, right? That maybe look from first glance to be inappropriate or not based on policy or whatever. And you got to look at the facts to see whether or not it was.
And when you're evaluating your staff, you're doing that in an employment context.
Yeah.
Perhaps I should, ask you if you believe that officers should be evaluated, or to the extent any second guessing is allowed, that be more in an employment context and not brought into a criminal court. What are your
Depends
thoughts
on if
that?
there was a criminal act.
Okay. And so is it fair to say that if you believe there was a criminal act, even though you somewhat disagree with the proposition of second guessing what decisions officers make when they're on duty, you would be able to separate yourself from that disagreement and determine whether or not a criminal act actually occurred?
Yes.
You did indicate in your description of the I guess your impressions of the defendants, but you have some empathy for the officers. Fair?
Fair.
And I guess I need to ask you in terms of that. I mean, would you have a difficult time serving in a case in which someone for whom you have empathy, you have to evaluate that person's conduct and determine if they committed a crime? Would that make you uncomfortable?
No. I mean, at the end of the day, I said earlier too that I have empathy for George Floyd as well. And I don't think, I hope, that people don't mean, like no one, I don't think wants this to happen or to take someone's life, if that is what happened. And so, that's where the empathy comes from. I'm sure his death was not something that anyone wanted. So that's where the empathy comes from, because at the end of the day, I'm sure the intention was not there for this to happen.
Explain what you mean by that. The intention was not there for this to happen. Could you explain that a little further?
Well, I would assume that when the police first arrived, and I don't know the order of how, like I said, I didn't really follow the story all that much. I followed bits and pieces. But whoever first arrived, I'm assuming they didn't arrive with the intention of it progressing the way it did and having an end result where a man was dead and other men are on trial for his murder or manslaughter. I may not be using the right words. This is a commoner word. But I'm sure nobody wanted that on either side, right? So that's what I mean.
Okay. And the opinion you expressed that you're sure that no one intended for something like this to happen, I just need to ask you, because, there's not only what happened, by what you may have viewed on the video, but, the different charges, there are different things that have to be proved, and what someone's intentions were is in fact a contested issue in the case.
Okay.
And so, you've stated a fairly strong opinion that you believe it wouldn't have been anyone's intention for what happened to happen. Not saying that it is or it isn't, but you have to understand that is something that you would have to set aside as well. That you would have to evaluate such elements, mental state elements as intent, freshly as well. And I'm wondering, given what you've just expressed, would you struggle with that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm coming from a standpoint that I believe that people are inherently good, and we don't mean ill will towards other people in general. And so, but once again, this is an outsider perspective that doesn't know facts, that wasn't there, that until I'm presented with that stuff, and if I'm not on the trial, I will never be presented with that stuff. If I am on the trial, I get presented with that stuff, and then I can make that determination at that time.
And would you be able to do that? I mean, you have expressed that you believe people are inherently good people and wouldn't want to do something that would hurt someone else. And I, that's certainly a noble belief. But you should know, again, every single element of the case is something the government has to prove, but it's a contested issue.
Mm-hmm.
You would need to be able to be sure that you could put aside any beliefs, whether they be noble or cynical, and freshly determine whether or not someone intended to do a particular act. Would you be able to do that?
Absolutely, because the facts are going to show that,
Okay.
or the evidence.
On general impressions of George Floyd, you indicated, the phrase "not a model." He was not a model citizen. Most of us have some skeletons, and he may have had more than most. Now, do you have any information, like what specific information were you thinking of when you made that statement?
I remember hearing differing reports, of course, but you heard things about him moving to Minnesota to have a better life. But you also heard stuff that this wasn't his first time passing, I think it was fake money, right? But it maybe wasn't his first time, and I think maybe I'd heard about some drug or, in his system or involved or something to that effect. But that's all I've heard.
That he may have had drugs in his system and something about fake money
Yeah.
on a prior occasion? Okay.
I believe that he was passing a fake $20 bill or something, which is what initiated the police call or something, but, and that it wasn't his first time or something to that effect.
Okay, that's what you've heard. In terms of, I guess, anything else? Did you hear anything else?
He worked at a nightclub as a bouncer.
Okay. As far as possible skeletons
Oh,
in his closet,
no.
I'm just trying to...
No.
Okay. So when you heard that he may have had drugs in his system, that George Floyd may have had drugs in his system, what did that make you think?
I'm not sure it made me think anything. It could be relevant, it could maybe not be relevant. I mean, how would I know? I wouldn't know unless I'm given medical coroner proof or something. I don't, I don't think I had a thought to it.
It was such a general question. I mean, that it sounds like from what you're saying, it may or may not have some effect on, from a medical standpoint. And really the thrust of my question is, did it change your opinion of Mr. Floyd when you heard, or maybe not change your opinion, but did it cause a negative impression in your mind of Mr. Floyd when you heard that he may have had drugs in his system?
I am not a proponent of any drug use, and so I would say anyone probably negatively impacts my opinion of them. And that'd be anyone, you know. Just because I don't like them.
Understood. It sounds like you have some strong and deeply held beliefs about illegal drugs. Fair?
Fair. But people do make mistakes too.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, we're not perfect, you know, once again, and I don't know what his full history is or situation was. So I can't pass judgment necessarily on that, but because of my belief systems of being kind of anti-drugs, yes, I mean, the fact that any user kind of floats to me with a negative impression.
And when we say negative impression, tell me what those impressions are. What do you think when you think
that
of
they're
someone?
just making bad choices.
Some people may say that someone who has taken illegal drugs and then, dies in some sort of a interaction with the police have only themselves to blame. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that statement would be justified or accurate.
You had a prior experience serving on a jury, and you indicated that was a civil case?
I believe it was civil. This is a long time ago. This was in the 90s.
Okay. Doesn't seem like that long ago, to me anyway. Well, back in the 90s, did you get to deliberate on that case?
No, I was the alternate, which they didn't tell me until the very end.
And what was your reaction when you found out that after sitting and watching the trial that you were the alternate?
I was like, gosh darn it, I sat through this whole thing and I don't get to weigh in.
Right. You were given an example, or I guess posed a hypothetical of two people. I think the example was it's supposed to be a 6-foot fence, but it's an 8-foot fence, and the city enforces it, and both the African-American family and the white family, and one might feel selected for that sort of treatment. I wanted to remind you of that exchange, and then follow up on something a term you used, and that was implicit bias. What do you understand implicit bias to be?
Depending on how we were raised, the belief systems and the morals and values in which we were raised, in the environment and communities which we were raised up, kind of designs how we view the world. And I think no matter who the person is and what color they are, and that upbringing creates bias. And that's implicit bias that we have to suss out for ourselves and recognize and acknowledge in order to kind of help ourselves grow and in how we do see the world and how we treat other people and how we view situations or individuals.
You discussed a conversation. You shared a conversation that you had with an African-American coworker who is also a mom, and you both have sons approximately the same age. And she was describing to you how she taught her son to grab the steering wheel if pulled over by the police, and you indicated, never thought of that.
Right.
Okay. Was that a comfortable conversation for you to have?
With her, yes, because there was a lot of trust between us. But have I discussed my personal, my known biases that I know of? And is it always comfortable? No. But with her it was, because, she was a coworker, but we were good friends.
You'd recognize and I suppose explicit bias would be you passing judgment, overtly, consciously on someone. But implicit bias, I'm assuming that could happen without a person even realizing.
Yes.
Okay. And so even if the person who is being biased doesn't realize it, would you agree that that would not affect how it feels to the person being discriminated against?
Agreed.
You have indicated that you have trust and respect for law enforcement officers. I need to ask you if a law enforcement officer is called to testify as a witness in the case, if you would place their testimony on equal footing as any other witness, say a bystander, or if the officer's testimony in your mind would be slightly more credible than that of another witness.
No, I would say it's equal.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Thank you. And then I just wanted to ask you, you indicated earlier in the course of your professional work, you've had interaction with Mr. Ellison, is that right?
Yes.
Anything about your interactions with Mr. Ellison, positive, negative, neutral?
No, I think all of our interactions were positive at the time.
Okay. And nothing about your prior interactions with Mr. Ellison would come to bear in this case if you were selected and seated as a juror?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Juror 44. We pass for cause.
All right. Juror 44, you will serve on this jury. And so I'm going to release you until March 29th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And at that time, you'll come back and we're going to actually start the trial. We expect 4 weeks. That's our best estimate. And so the deputy will escort you out and take the yellow lanyard from you, but that letter that you got with the seal on it, or the sticker on it, that got, oh, you didn't have it today coming in.
Yeah.
That letter with the sticker, make sure you bring that, because that'll get you to the building on March 29th.
Okay.
If you misplaced it, just let us know and we'll...
No, I have the original summons and I have something else, at home on my desk.
It should be a letter with a sticker.
Okay.
If you don't have it, call the jury office and we'll make sure you get one by March 29th.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions?
No.
We will give you a reminder right before, but at the same time, if you don't hear from us, March 29th at 9 a.m.
Okay.
And just the deputies will do the same thing, escort you to the right place.
Okay, parking the underground parking.
Yeah, we're parking wherever we are. We're not going to talk about that too much, about where we are.
But that's where I would
yeah,
get in.
same thing,
Okay.
same process. So you can go with the deputy and we'll proceed from there.
Okay, what do you want me to do with this?
You can take that with you, or you could...
I'm guessing you don't want me to take it.
There's a recycling bucket right there. The deputy will take it.
Okay.
They'll take it.
Oh, sorry, let me get my mask,
We're going to go off the record and also off audio just for...